Hi, very good morning to you. It's Jim from Avstar Observatory. We're looking at a picture of Chisel Beach, and Friday evening there was a last minute decision after watching a few videos Friday afternoon on the fishing on Chisel Beach. It was decided that we go Saturday morning and come back or leave Chisel Beach at 4 o'clock Sunday, spending a good 24 hours there night fishing. So we set off Saturday morning, everything was good. Forecast was a little bit of rain and sunshine, and that is exactly what we got up until about 8 o'clock Saturday evening when it opened up its first heavy downpour. And it was a really good test for a lot of things, not just how waterproof the clothing I took, which to be fair is more for skiing in, or should be said more for snowboarding in than anything else. But if the weather isn't too bad, generally the clothes I wore was more than enough to keep me warm throughout the night without having to rely on the wood and the coal that we took as well, but it usually would keep me dry as well. Well, after the first downpour, we'd set up a little fishing pod, which is really only suitable for one person, but you can squeeze two in there, and that's exactly what we did. And I thought, it'd be a good test for my skills as well, not just for my ability to hunt and provide some food for myself, but also to give some of the gear in my bug out bag a little trial run. And I've got to say, a lot of the stuff was not up to the job. And I would definitely recommend, any of you guys, putting your actual equipment to the test, because this was a planned weekend for us on this beach that you're looking at. And it went, I've got to say, terribly wrong, but it won't be one of those weekends where you'll never forget it and look back and have a good laugh, because at the time it wasn't funny, but, now looking back, after experiencing all we did, and there's more to this story than meets the eye. I mean, I'll just get to the point, 12 o'clock, we had to call it a day and bail back to the car because everything was just soaking wet. And the fishing was impossible because the waves was good. If you was down on Chisel Beach in Dorset yesterday, you would have known what I was talking about. Yesterday morning, I have never seen the ocean so angry, especially down there. And it was too dangerous to fish in any case. If you'd have gone too close to the edge on the beach line, where the waves were crashing in, it would have just took one rogue wave. And anyone that fishes on Chisel Beach knows that it can be perilous if that happens. Because if you go in and that water takes you out, you're already in a good 10 metre depth water, only being a few feet out. The depth drops off dramatically there. I think if you're 100 metres out, you're already in 60 metres deep water. So it's a real, hard testing coastline for fishers. There's a good range of fish on there. You get dogfish, whiting, you can get cod, and that's what we was always hoping for this weekend, to catch cod, but all we seemed to get was bites. I took a variety of bait. I didn't take black lugworm, which I know is very popular on the beach for cod fishing, but we did take squid, mackerel, and I thought it'd be ideal to take some sardines, being as the local monger had got some fresh sardines in there. I thought we'd take them as well. And like I say, we did have a few knocks on the rod. Some fish were obviously going for the bait, but I just think the conditions were just way too much to get anything successful out of the day's fishing. And it was abandoned around 12 o'clock on the night, despite us being set up for night fishing. The amount of rain that came down was just impossible to stay comfortable and fish. Now just think about this, it was a planned weekend. If this had been a catastrophe, I'd have really been put out of depth. I'd have been struggling to feed my loved ones. I'd have been struggling to, keep warm and fight off this time of the year, a real possibility of hypothermia. And, of course we had the car to bail back to. Now, in other circumstances, you wouldn't have all those. You probably wouldn't have, the clothing I had, which should have kept me warm in moderate rain. And that was what was promised by the Met Office. And I have to say, come on guys at the Met Office, when you give a weather warning, don't just say it's going to be a little bit rainy and then a little bit sunny, when we should have had weather warnings for Dorset, because we ended up driving off. We had to go back on the beach, get our stuff early in the morning, around about 7 o'clock when daylight broke, and luckily enough it was all still there and hadn't been raped and pillaged by the thieves, because that's what normally would happen, isn't it? You couldn't leave your fishing gear and all your gear there on the beach, and return. The next morning it will still be there, but thank God it was. But it was still raining torrentially, and even down by the beach car park on Chisel Beach, there was torrents of water running down the road towards the car park. And I said to the person that I was with, I said, you see that drain there, which is overflowing now because it's gone past its capacity to deal with the amount of flood water. I said, that's a bad sign. And we was only to find out just how bad that was a sign coming out of Weymouth yesterday. If you was in that region, or you live in that region, you know exactly what I was talking about. Well, we was leaving setting off around about 9:30, and we must have hit 10 regions within an hour that had flooded, and the one, I'm not sure where it was, but the garage was literally running with water. And if you was down there, you would have seen us in a white Mercedes A-Class trying to get through, only to be find that 2 people had already had their car submerged and had broken down, and one had tried to go around it, and the same had happened to them. One thing I did notice about people driving in these floodwaters, which was well over centre cap height, or the centre of the wheel height, and well over the sill line like it was with us, is the speed at which they was driving through the floodwater. I think people need to use a bit of common sense, because I had some impatient people behind me, and I had some people in front of me that was just doing some silly things, and it was no wonder the cars were breaking down, and especially if there was in BMWs. Now, I want to say this: if you've got a BMW, then I would not take that car into floodwater over sill level, because they are prone for breaking down. My brother works for a recovery company, and he's always in floods bailing out BMWs, and we think it's something on the gearbox. There's a sensor on the gearbox that shuts the drive down and therefore makes the car immobile in floodwater. And BMWs seem to be the worst ones that suffer with this problem. Not sure about the 4x4 BMWs, but certainly the saloons and family cars always seem to be the ones stuck in floodwater. But we came through some floods, and people were blasting through them, and of course the water was going up. The spray side of the car was going up a good 6 foot, and there must have been about 2 foot of water. Now, when I say you have to use your brains, if the water is spraying up either side of the outside of the car at 6 foot, well, there's another side to that tyre which is spraying that up under your engine bay. And the idea is, if you want to go through a flood without breaking down in it like we did yesterday, then the slower is the better. And you've got to be sure of where your air intake is on that engine, because as soon as the air intake is full with water, that's going into the engine, and it will very likely bend the con rods, because they will just hydraulic. When the air goes into that to compress and mix with the fuel, it will just bend the con rods. So just take your time in these flood waters. But the other thing is, always bear in mind about your bug out bag, and if you're just collecting this stuff, it's a good thing, but put it to the test, and put yourself in a scenario where you'd been in an emergency situation, just to see how you bear up with your equipment. Like I say, I've got some learning to do. I've got to say, my fire lighting skills are excellent, and that's a simple one, isn't it, to get right. If you're using logs, just make sure you kindle them right down to little splinters or feathers. Make sure that there is very, very small pieces of wood to start your fire going, and then you can add gradually the bigger and the bigger. And if you've got a bag of coal like we did, you can just chuck the coal on top of that, and it will give you a nice warm glow all night long. I know in ideal situations you're not going to have coal, you're just going to have wood, but it gives you an idea of what you need to do. Is really what I'm saying here is just put it to practice. My fishing skills let me down, obviously. Weather conditions weren't perfect, but that's no excuse. I was fishing there for a good 7 hours before we had, major trouble with weather, and caught nothing. Had a few bites but caught nothing. But again, these are things that you need to think about. You need to be able to, if you can't get hold of fish, you need to know what's in your vicinity so that you can forage a little bit of food, because every day that goes on that you haven't got food in your belly, or those people that are with you, they're going to get weaker and weaker. So from day one you have to hit the road running, as far as I'm concerned, and you have to be able to catch that food for that day, put something in your belly, and you can go another day. It's like banking up the food storage, only your body's the bank, and you've got to keep it topped up with money, or in this point, food. So yeah, disappointed with the Met Office, disappointed with my ability to manage with just ordinary weather, let alone catastrophic weather. But it just gives you a good idea of what we'll really be up against when things really get bad. And I suppose it's on that note we should really look at something scientific with regards to climate and everything. And I've prepared a chart this morning, spent about half hour on that, just adding some information onto a chart for you, which I think is relevant. So let's get on with that. I wanted to just, before we move on to the chart, bring to your attention that it isn't the first time in October that we've had massive floods. This goes back to the 4th of October, where a month's worth of rain, 4 hours. But I wanted to bring your attention to what's on the right hand side of the chart, where there are these top stories. Climate at 1 minute to midnight, says Boris Johnson. As world leaders gather for the COP26 in Glasgow, Prime Minister Boris Johnson says action is needed. And then the next headline down there, world leaders under pressure to avoid climate catastrophe. And then again, the one underneath that, warlike footing needed on climate. And I suppose that's coming from Prince Charles. So, the rhetoric gears up on climate change, and the world leaders are still banging and beating the drum of man-made CO2 and global warming causing climate. Now, this next chart just should be something that's presented to these idiots when they're talking live stream, so that they're embarrassed completely about what it is they're actually think they're in knowledge of, when we clearly know they're not. And here it is. So here we've got CO2 vs temp and cold vs warm over 400,000 years. I think if you're going to talk about climate, you should do it over a respectful period of time, and you should look at least some past cycles. As you know, once we cross the line of 0 into the more positive temperature, so 1 and 2 degrees Celsius, we go into interglacial periods. But when you dip below 0, you go into glacial periods. Now, if we're talking about global warming, right, then we must also have a look at what has happened over the years prior, and we've got a good 400,000 years of climate we can look at here, where we can see what's been warm and what's been cold. But what we do see is the cold periods towards the right hand side getting longer and longer. And if we add up all the cold periods compared to the warm periods, what we see is the totals up on the top there. We see that around 75,000 years, and I've been really generous because I've just said that for each warm period or each interglacial period, they last between 10 and 15,000 years. So I've been generous, I've given 15,000 years compared to how long we stay in the cold periods. And you can see the last cold period we had compared to the last warm period was 100,000 years, vs 30,000 years. If you want to add the two warm periods up together in that period of time, it's still more cold than warm we've had in the last 150,000 years. And then it goes back to 80,000 years of cold, 70,000 years of cold, vs 15,000 years, and then 60,000 years of cold, vs 15,000 years of warm. If you just look at the majority of the weather or temperature, warm vs cold on this, what you should be talking about, Boris Johnson, is not global warming. It is clearly global cooling, because we are having more years where it is colder than we are having more years where it is warmer. It doesn't make any sense at all when Boris Johnson or any other world leader comes out and talks about global warming. What they are not doing is showing people the facts. What they are doing is clearly taxing people. Now, you surely should get the facts before you bring out carbon taxes or climate taxes. You should have the facts, and those facts should be tested. We know that there is no longer an opportunity to test those facts because the debate on climate now has been closed. How do we know that? Because Google and also YouTube and platforms like that are stopping people earning advert revenue. Not that we do earn much advert revenue anyhow, and we would miss it regardless, but they are stopping people earning advert revenue if they have an alternative view on climate. Now, I want to ask you the question, give me your answer in the comment section. Is there a debate to argue global warming and cooling, or should we now just accept the fact that it's global cooling, given the fact I've just showed you the data over the last 400,000 years? Should we be calling it global cooling, or should we be calling it global warming? Are we, as well, more likely to be going into a glacial period than staying in this current interglacial period? And I've got to say that I think we've already crossed the line. I think we are almost now notably and recognisably in a glacial period already. And if we had the facts like we've looked at already last month or within the last week, we know that the Arctic ice has put on another 2 million kilometres of ice in 1 year, and that record has not seen that quantity of ice since 2012 this year. Regardless of that, they're still going into our pockets via the tax route and stealing it and sharing it out with the buddies. I mean, I'm just saying that, but that's what it seems like to me. You know, that this is just an excuse when there is so many facts out there which prove otherwise what they're saying. Why are they not allowing people on the media with information like what you're looking at now, where you can clearly see global cooling is more president than global warming? Why won't they do that? And on top of that, we're being targeted now. Little observatories like ours, scientists like me, are being targeted through showing you information like this now. They are closing the door on this topic and welding it tight shut so it can never be opened again, which means that eventually people won't know an alternative to the truth. You know, I think they're exposing themselves way too much now. And, you know, it is shocking that people, in fact, when we talk about people, we are talking about the majority of people are going along with them. I mean, you just look at the last rally that Extinction Rebellion had in this country. You know, the amount of people that turned out to support the fact that, you know, if we add any more CO2 to the atmosphere, we will kill our future generations. They're just misinformed with the truth. Absolutely misinformed. They're not prepared to do their own work. They're not prepared to have a look at the alternative discussions on climate, and that's where we start to make major mistakes. And you know what? These people that want to stay at the top of the monetary system are really pleased about that people are thick and that they can be manipulated with shitty data very easily. They love that. But, you know, it is going to be difficult for a lot of people to find the truth out in the not too distant future, because all those that are standing up to these people that are saying global warming and man-made climate modifications, you know, are disappearing. They're having their pensions threatened. They're being laughed at work, ridiculed and victimised, and you know, they're losing their jobs. So, you know, when someone comes up to them and says, do you want to lose your job? Do you want to lose your pension? You know, do you want to complete your mortgage on your house? Do you want to put your family in poverty street? And if they say, of course not, then they say, well, change your narrative on the viewpoints that you've got and fall in line. So what we've got now is lemmings following more lemmings. You know, what we've got now is people, and like the Bible said, people that would rather believe in a lie than believe in the truth. And we're definitely seeing that now, because 98% of the population of this world believe that man has modified the climate to the point where we've changed it in favour of global warming. I could present fact after fact after fact, even using one chart like this. I've presented so many facts, like last week. Look how many years it takes for CO2 to just drop 100 parts per million. And look what happens when you have an extended warm period like we're in right now, compared to CO2. What happens? The degassing, when you're going backwards and forwards close to that 0 degree line Celsius, you are going to get more outgassing of CO2 out the oceans. So CO2 will rise, but look at how long it takes for CO2 to drop 100 parts per million. You're looking at 100,000 years. So whatever we do now in our little life expectancy of 0 to 70 years old, that's about our life expectancy, isn't it? We're lucky if we live older than that. But what can we physically do to drive down CO2 by any significant amount when it takes 100,000 years to drop 100 parts per million? CO2 has been added to the atmosphere not since the Industrial Revolution. You can clearly see it. It has been added to the atmosphere through natural warming from the Younger Dryas period 10 to 15,000 years ago. That's when global warming, if they want to argue global warming, that's when they should be looking at the global warming effect. And in a lot of cases when they present the data, that's all they show you. The last peak, which is, really misleading the real information. If you want a real, or you want a reasonable view of how temperature fluctuates on this earth, then you have to have a look at what happens at least for the last 400,000 years, where we see interglacial and glacial periods. I'm telling you now, if we go back 100,000 years, humans weren't on this planet, but the atmosphere had warmed out of a glacial period. You can clearly see it on this chart. Man was not even responsible or even there at that point in time. We've only been on this planet 45,000 years. We could never have been responsible for the last 4 interglacial periods and glacial periods. And we're not going to be responsible for our activities in the future with regards to modifying climate with whatever we try to do. We couldn't double the amount of CO2 in our atmosphere that's at that point right now. And every scientist on this planet would agree with me. You can't double it to 800 parts per million. But I'll tell you now, if we did, it wouldn't affect anybody. Nobody would be affected by it. In fact, the diversity of plant species and across all the range of that sort of biodiversity would thrive. We know that because commercial greenhouse growers pump up the levels of CO2 in the greenhouses to 1200 to 1500 parts per million. And they're telling us that the debate on climate, the debate on CO2, the debate on anything to do with man-made climate change has been finished. Now you'll accept our narrative and you'll accept our research, which is a pack of lies. I'd have more respect for Extinction Rebellion to get on the right side of this argument. And we have seen people that work for Greenpeace now, people that were high up in Greenpeace, that are now working with the petroleum companies because they know the truth. Let me tell you something now, the majority of this world relies on petroleum, so don't beat the petroleum guys up for, pumping crude oil out the ground. Don't beat them up for contaminating this world. We have got some responsibilities and we have got some real major faults. I'm talking about the garbage that we've just sprayed all around this world and it's ended up in our oceans. There's something that we've done. We've changed the marine ecology because of the amount of rubbish that we've put in the oceans around the world. There's something that, if you want to point the blame at man, that he has done. Yes, we've destroyed marine nurseries where species of fish thrive and breed. We're responsible for that 100%. We're not responsible for the climate though on this planet. Give nature a little credit back. Guys, moving on to another note, we've managed to pay £1,000 off the deficit and, not dip into any of the £3,000 budget that I've got set aside. So that we could look at it as a little extension from January, but it's still not, picking back at that deficit that we've driven up over the last 19 months. The only way we can do something about that is if more people support what we're doing. You know, you need to get on the right side of this argument, guys. You know, because if we allow little observatories like this to disappear, along with it goes a lot of truth. It might be a small observatory, but it packs a massive punch when it comes down to setting the record straight on climate. And I don't mind putting that extra effort in if I'm getting the support, and that's really all I need at this end, a little bit more support. And therefore I will mention the link down there in the description. That's where you can make your line in the sand and take on the fight yourself, is by keeping an observatory like this that broadcasts the truth out there, despite, you know, being told that this discussion is now finished. I will still keep on until the majority of the people understand that this is nothing but a climate hoax, what is going on right now, and it is being orchestrated by billionaires at the top, and they need to have their pants pulled down and the bum smacked. So if you want to help us do that, we need a bit of support, and we will do our best efforts to inform the people and keep you informed on that important topic that we are always talking about, the magnetic pole shift and the reversals. Guys, you have an amazing day. Links down there if you want to help support us, and I'll say what I usually do. Bye for now.